else like to record tonight's meeting? Seeing no one, why don't we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, we will start with the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. I actually have three fun student things to bring to your attention tonight, and then I'm going to ask Lemma to talk about one operations issue. So first, I put some information in your packet that we have 23 Westwood students who have received awards from the Massachusetts Scholastic Art and Writing Awards Program, which is sponsored by the Boston Globe and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts. So students submitted artwork. More than 10,000 pieces of art were submitted to this competition. The submissions are judged by people based on their originality, their technical skill, and the emergence of a personal voice or vision. So we had 23 students who garnered 29 awards. Some of them got more than one piece accepted. We had 9 gold keys, 6 silver keys, and 14 honorable mentions. So what you see on the screen here are images of the 9 gold key pieces, and they are quite remarkable. And this shows you how not tuned in I've been. I finally realized today that they are live on display in central office. So they're in a case right now just as you come in the door, but they will also be on exhibit at Breed Hall at Tufts University from March 14th to the 22nd. It's the exhibition, if anyone can get out to see that. So congratulations to those students, and also to Katie Thurston, who's our K-12 Director of Art, and all of the teachers who work with those students. It's fantastic.
Great.
I also want to do a shout out to our Thurston Middle School Math Counts team. They just competed in the Metro South Math Counts competition. I'm going to read the names of the kids who are on the team. So Jason Guo, Jeffrey Pan, Bailey Zhang, Jessica Wang, Ivan Kai, Chaya Elgert, Celine Aristiran, Jefferson G, Luke Maxwell, Sean Tao, and Anthony Yang. And I'm going to read here what their advisor, David Lim, sent along. He said, special congrats to our team, Jason, Jeffrey, Bailey, and Jessica, who took first place team overall and will advance to the state competition on March 7th. Congrats to Jefferson G for qualifying individually for states. And congratulations to Jessica Wang for placing 3rd overall individually. And Anthony Yang, quote, for dominating the countdown round and taking home a first place trophy.
Wow.
That is apparently sort of a quiz bowl format. So first place trophy for team, first place trophy for the countdown round, 3rd place trophy for the individual, and the individual qualifying states. So pretty good.
Do we put this into the newspaper to,
Yeah, we'll do an article on that. It's fantastic. So congrats to all those kids and to Mr. Lamb.
And the math, the ones that come early in the morning to practice?
I don't know when they practice. Is it after school? It's after
A
school.
little younger they do
Yeah, the younger kids do before school. And then one other piece of great news from the Thurston, this we've actually already submitted to the newspaper. So students in Bridget Cecier's class were, they apparently were brainstorming something that they could do as a service project. And they decided that they wanted to do something for our folks serving in the military. And they came up with this idea that maybe they could collect video games and send them to soldiers overseas. They thought maybe that's something that would be nice. So Mrs. Cecier reached out to Lieutenant Colonel Michael Peters, who I guess is a neighbor of hers, who is currently serving at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. And it turns out that they were onto something, that yes, soldiers do have access to be able to play games. And so they managed to round up 20 new and used video games. They packaged them up and sent them over to the military base. And I have here, so Lieutenant Colonel Peters sent them a very nice handwritten note thanking them for their efforts, and also sent us this flag that apparently flew over the base. And so we are very honored to have that. Mr. Redmond is going to have it framed and displayed in some way. We thought we might actually fly it for a little bit. First, Mr. Redmond assures me that properly folding the flag is a skill that he possesses. And so we can fly it and then get it folded again. So thanks very much to those kids for
really great.
having that idea and following
Make
through.
arrangements for that class that did it to march the Memorial Day parade.
Maybe,
As a
that's an
part of
idea.
that,
Yeah.
Get some acknowledgement for
Yeah.
what they've done.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. Yeah, it's great. So lots of good stuff happening. And now I'm going to turn over to Lemma. This is in the less good, not as good news category, but some.
So I just have an update. So we received an email from a parent this week, and it had a photo of a ground floor, the exterior of a window at the Sheehan School, ground floor window, where there was caulk that had broken off that windowsill and it had fallen onto the mulch bed. And the parent was concerned because of potential asbestos or lead. And I wanted just to say, like, first of all,
In the caulk?
in the caulk itself, yes, or in the paint on the caulk. And so that's a reasonable question, given that it's an old building. It was opened in 1948, and old school buildings are known to have asbestos, so this is a fact of life. So I wanted to give some context on what's our status here. The first is that we had a inspection in July last summer. That was part of our annual 3-year inspections for asbestos at the Sheehan School specifically. So we have that report. The report gave us an update on where we are. There wasn't an immediate action out of that was required by the inspector. They didn't address exterior caulk in that report. And so I looked to other guidelines then for instruction on next steps here in a situation like this. And the first thing that is constantly heard with respect to asbestos is that when you find asbestos, if it is intact, the best move is to leave it alone. So not to touch it, not to disturb it, if possible. That's the guideline. The other from the Mass Department of Environmental Protection is that when there is some damage or any kind of breakage in an area where there could be asbestos, what shapes your response is the scope of the damage, so the area that's impacted. So there's a different response to areas inside buildings, for example. If it's a 3 square foot area and less, there's one response, and then if it's a larger area that's impacted, it's a different response. In situations where we've encountered chipped tile, we've been told that there's no significant action on our part that's required. So we'll have to look at the scope of this. That's my first reaction. So what we intend to do with the Sheehan is just to visually inspect the perimeter of the building to see if there's more caulk that is chipping or breaking away. Depending on the scope of the situation, we'll respond accordingly. We need to address those areas where it is chipping. And then we certainly can test for asbestos, and we would want to be sealing and just making sure that there's no further damage. So that will be the approach that we take there. And it's a similar approach with lead. So lead is a concern. These buildings have been painted many times since 1978, so it's quite possible that there is no lead in the exterior paint that we're seeing there. But when there is lead paint, it's mostly a concern when it's chipping or peeling. So that's the issue. And again, that's the attention that we'll have to pay, is to areas where it's chipping or peeling and take the appropriate response. So we could, if we see that that's the case, test for lead and respond accordingly based on that. So that's our next step for that. And we have February vacation coming up, so that's an opportunity to act quickly. I'm trying to see if there were any other key points. The other thing is that we have regular building checks, so I wanted to highlight that because our operations department does perimeter checks more frequently in the winter, and they will continue to do that on an ongoing basis to check for things like this, but we appreciate the note from the parent.
Thanks, Leah.
No problem.
Okay, so we're now going to, I don't have any updates, but are there any liaison reports or you wanted to just talk about the March forum?
Sure. Yep, so for the building project, where we are is, school building committee met this morning, and there was the subcommittee, the evaluation criteria subcommittee of the school building committee recommended 7 out of the 15 proposals, designs to move forward to a short list. So the members of the SBC are reviewing that list, and we'll vote on that in March, whether, to move these 7 forward to an official shortlist. In the meantime, on March 2nd, we are having another community forum where we will essentially give the same information that we did to the SBC, which is what are the 7 options that the subcommittee recommended to move forward, and how did the evaluation criteria, how did we see each option vis-a-vis the evaluation criteria. So there's also, of course, going to be an opportunity for questions. We're looking for feedback. But that is March 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Thurston Middle School cafeteria. They've been really well attended by the public, so hopefully that will continue to happen.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other updates?
It's also worth mentioning that this morning's meeting of 2 hours, the detail is on Westwood Media Center. So if people
Yeah.
want to get into it,
Yeah.
it is out there and available, what was said at these detailed meetings.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the video has come out yet for this morning's meeting, but Westwood Media Center is on it, and it will be. I also filmed a 3-minute update, so I took 2 hours and shoved it in 3 minutes, and that will also be coming out on Westwood Media Center.
Another update.
Oh yeah, we're doing monthly
No,
updates.
Those have been well received in 3 minutes.
All 40 viewers.
Good. Okay, thanks for the update. Any other? I know that. All right, so now we're going to discussion items. The first one being the public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 budget. So this is.
Oh, no, so I was gonna say, I don't have any, I presented it last month, I don't have anything to update, other than we did meet with the FinCom Education Subcommittee, and then we also presented to the full FinCom, I guess that was just this week, Tuesday night. So we've done those steps in the process. Nothing new.
Any questions come up that?
I mean, there were a couple of questions, but I feel
Nothing
like
they
they were all
want.
questions that we had discussed
But you've been
here.
working with them for a long time anyway to prepare them, so it's not like.
Yeah.
the last
Well,
minute.
we had a good discussion with the subcommittee. I mean, that's where, they're the people who were charged with really getting into the details and having a detailed conversation. So we did that, I think, last week sometime with the whole team. And-
Well, I think Emily and I know Tony spending a lot of early mornings working on a committee, which allows us now to have a common agreement on how to proceed.
Yeah.
Which makes it so much easier.
It does facilitate it if you're talking all along. Yes.
Thanks.
Good, so this is an opportunity, this is the public comment period, so this is an opportunity for anyone to make a comment on the proposed budget. If you do have a comment, I would ask that you address it to me as the chair, limit it to 2 minutes. So does anyone have any comments on fiscal year 2021 budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on, all right?
Great.
So the next item is a public comment on the Student Opportunity Act Plan.
Yes, and so we haven't talked about this really, so I thought that I would say a few things about it. So we've talked about it in general and concept, but in your packet I included a draft of the plan. So just to review, this is with the new legislation in Massachusetts that is designed to increase funding to public schools. Part of that law requires that every district submit by April 1st of this year what's called the Student Opportunity Act Plan. And so we are required to identify how we are going to be spending the increased funds to address, to support a subgroup of our students towards closing the achievement gap, basically. So I will say that it's a little difficult to tease out what number are we trying to represent in terms of how many dollars are new dollars. Apparently 85% of the funding is going to 35 districts in the state. It really is, a game changer for some districts for whom the funding formula was very outdated. However, we are not one of the communities that is receiving that kind of money. And so I had told you before that I thought that we would get about $30 a kid. And then when I saw the governor's preliminary budget come out, it looked like we were getting about $76 a kid, so we had a moment of rejoicing. But then, what we realized when we really sort of, Lemma thankfully really dug into the formula and what's that about. And it turns out we got about $30 a kid. And then this addition is because coincidentally, this is the first year that we aren't charging for full day kindergarten. So when you are charging tuition for full day kindergarten, your kindergartners in the formula are counted as half a student. And then once you're not charging for kindergarten, now they're full students. And so we're getting a little more
So it's
money.
a change in our enrollment effectively.
Yes, it's effectively a change in our enrollment, and so that's why it looked like there was this little increase of about, I can't remember what we calculated for the kindergarten.
Maybe 40,000.
Yeah,
It
like
was
$40,000.
significant.
Certainly in no way the magnitude of the offset that we need to backfill since we don't have the tuition, but, helpful.
Good.
So the math, am I doing the math, is it 90 plus 40, is that 130,000? If you do 30, and 3,000 students times 30, I'm just doing quick math.
It's not, are you thinking 90 students? What are you
I'm thinking 3,000 students in the district. Maybe that
Oh, I
might be
see.
Yeah.
Times $30.
Yeah, exactly.
9,000.
Yes, yes,
So
sorry, I
90,000.
didn't know we were doing.
Yes.
Yes.
9 bulk.
That
That
was
would be-
exactly it.
Yeah, that would be the
About
second
so
year.
about $90,000, yes. And yet when you, related to that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
our Chapter 70 allocation is considerably more than that, and the increase year over year is something like 229,000. So that was sort of the question, that when we're writing this plan, which number are we trying to write the plan for? Presumably we would have gotten some increase had the law not changed. I did send that question off to Desi. I haven't gotten a response, and so I'm just making some assumptions at this point and seeing what happens. Basically, we need to represent a plan for how we're spending this money, but it's how we're spending the money within the proposed budget. It's not like it's actually, a check that's coming to us and we're going to spend it. So we've already accounted for this money when thinking about the 3.6% increase for next year. And so the Commissioner of Education sent out a template. It is a fairly straightforward one. And just quickly, so what we are doing is highlighting the work we're already doing. The subgroup that we've identified is students with disabilities. The gap that we're looking at is in English language arts. We're kind of focusing and saying we think the gap is most pronounced in grades 7 and 8. This is all right in line with what we are doing in terms of our strategic plan. We talked about it during the MCAS analysis. And so you'll see here that what we're proposing for these funds is what is currently in the budget, what we're planning to do. So we're noting that we've actually devoted 2.0 FTE literacy specialists. So not all of those are new positions, but they are contained within the budget. And then I'm also calling out the 0.4 FTE ELA department head. And these categories are just referring to the foundation budget categories. And then we needed to identify, they gave sort of this menu of what they're referring to as 17 evidence-based programs. And so the two that we think we're using is inclusion and co-teaching for students with disabilities and supporting educators to implement high-quality aligned curriculum. Those are our two strategies. And then they have these program categories. So hiring school personnel, and then increased or improved professional development. I'm going to adjust my draft right there. We think that's related to the work that the department is doing. Right? And so then commitment 3, you have to identify your outcome metrics. The targets don't happen until next year. And so again, they said here's sort of a menu of DESE outcome metrics. And I would say they strongly suggested that you take, they suggested it will be simpler and more straightforward if you take their metrics instead of determining your own. We had to have 3 metrics, and so what we've chosen here is ELA achievement, so that's MCAS scores, right? And then ELA mean student growth percentiles, SGP, which is another thing that comes out with MCAS. Honestly, the other DESE outcome metrics didn't really make sense for this. And so we have chosen our own, and that is, as you know, we have started using the STAR reading assessment, which is, you know, a valid and reliable assessment. So we will have data there. And then the fourth piece of this plan is to talk about, well, how are you making sure that you engage families of this subgroup? And so for us, we really talked about our commitment to collaborating with CPAC and the ways that we do that. And Abby also mentioned here that we are this year engaged in tiered focus monitoring from the program quality assurance of DESE. That's basically what we usually call the audit of our special education programs, and we are committed to looking at whatever those findings are.
Emily, would it be possible on some of these acronyms, just the first time, because I finally figured out what CPAC was, but I think there's a lot of people maybe who don't know.
Glossary.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
it is.
what is the?
Thank you. Yeah, it's in the written plan here.
The STAR. I mean, it just to remind
Oh.
people like me.
It's a good
people
question.
Forget things.
I actually don't know what STAR stands for. I think it's just the name. It's a reading assessment that you purchase. It's the company.
Okay, so it's a
that it
reading
doesn't stand for
exam
anything.
type of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't stand for anything in particular. But yes, CPAC is the Westwood Special Education Parent Advisory Council. There. So I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think it represents work that we've already talked about. So there's nothing really new. We just needed to present it in format that makes sense here.
Is there any accountability for the metrics?
Oh, sure.
If
So,
you don't show
um,
progress?
Yeah, well, they haven't said what will happen. But, so you submit your metrics by April 1st, and then you see here it says, please note, targets will be added to this section. This is DESE saying this, right? This is the template. Once the school year 2020 data is released in the fall. So, I mean, all of these metrics that we're looking at are part of the state accountability system, so they're always in play. It's what we're looking at every single year. It's not new. Arguably, by our putting a custom district outcome metric there, we're raising the bar a little bit and saying we're going to look at this other thing.
Any questions? So again, we have an opportunity for public comment on the Student Opportunity Act. Similar, please address me and limit it to no more than 2 minutes and state your name. Does anyone want to make a public comment then on the Student Opportunity Act plan? Okay, seeing none. I think we're ready for the next agenda item. So the next agenda item is the METCO program update.
Yes. Great. So I'd like to introduce Latifa Frank to you, who is our Director of METCO in Westwood. And Latifa is new to us this year. So I don't know that, I don't know that you've been officially introduced here. All right. So this is really the introduction. You probably remember that Cheryl Goodlow, who was our longtime committed METCO director, retired at the end of last year. And we're very happy to have Latifa with us. She came to us from the Lincoln Public School, so she's an experienced METCO director and has been doing some wonderful things with our students. So actually, can we pass that over to Latifa? And I will get your slides up here.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I am really excited to be here and to talk about our METCO program and to hear from you all as well about your vision for the program as I share mine. When I think about Westwood METCO, I feel like vision is important because it grounds the work that we're going to do. And so thinking about our vision is bridging two communities, and we've done this for over 50 years. Westwood was in the second wave of towns to come into the METCO program. Coming from Lincoln being in that first wave, I know the pride that towns feel when, they belong to the METCO program, and so I'm excited to be here and to continue to move the program forward. How do I move the slides forward?
Is it on?
Oh,
I think it is.
Right click.
yeah.
You know what? There you go.
There we go. Okay. So I just want to take a moment to talk about what is the METCO program. Just a brief history, the historical overview. There, in 50 years, there have been, some changes in the way the program is run. The, what's the same is the the outcomes. When the METCO grant was first written back in 1966, there were 3 outcomes that we wanted to make sure that we were providing students with educational opportunities, that we were also providing students that exchange of diversity, cultural diversity. And then the third was thinking about parents and the communities coming together and learning from each other and interacting with each other. And I've been a part of the METCO world for almost 10 years, and I think in many districts, that's the piece where, kind of the rubber is meeting the boots. The students, the children are, absorbed in each other and enmeshed in each other. And so working with the adults, the community, bridging the two communities together is where we often have to put our focus. And then I want to touch upon how the Westwood community can continue to support the METCO program and what you all can do to show support and to help us continue to grow. And then, of course, take questions and comments. So what is METCO? We know that the METCO program, we, in its essence, takes students from Boston and brings them into 33 suburban districts across Massachusetts, with an additional 2 districts that participate with students coming from Springfield. And it's one of the largest, the second longest running and the largest desegregation program in the United States. And so, it's wonderful for the town of Westwood to be a part of that. As I said, the goals of the program and really looking at expanding the educational opportunities, increasing the diversity, and then also to reduce the racial isolation between students, and so that students are being educated with a diverse group of classmates. So what I would like to do is show a brief video that really gets to the point very quickly in 4 minutes. Just where the METCO program started, where it got its roots, and then where we are now.
I'm hoping I have audio. I think I do. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to pause. And I'm going to turn to our technology director. We're looking for audio. Do I need to do something?
That's not a good phase.
No, that's not.
All right. I wonder if I'm going to try to problem solve on my own here. Is it this? Is it the output? School committee, right? That's what I want?
Yeah.
Output? Okay. Let's try it again.
What if you try at the top of your screen where the little... Because it'll show you the different audio outputs again, right by the battery pack.
Right, by the battery pack here.
Yeah.
Yep,
School
school
committee.
committee, that's what I should be on. Well, this might be beyond my...
Is it one of the little buttons over there? Buttons. Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
All right,
Try that
maybe,
again.
okay. Back it up and try it again.
No.
No.
It's gonna come on.
It's going to
Come on in.
go out of the building in a second.
Oh, there we go.
In the early 60s, Boston shorts were becoming increasingly
We may have to send it to you and post it on our website.
Yeah.
And have people see it later. Give them another.
It looks good.
So I can tell, well, if
Lip read.
we can talk, so pictured there is Jean McGuire, which some of you may, at least her name is familiar.
spoken in this
So,
very room.
yeah, so she retired in 2017, and METCO headquarters, as it's rebranded, got a new CEO, Millie Abiho Thomas, who came on, and she's really working to reinvigorate the grassroots efforts of the METCO program. She's working on partnerships within Boston, as well as within the suburban towns, and so we're really getting a new effort for the METCO program. One of the things that I think is most impactful within districts is the way that we are doing the enrollment piece for the METCO program. It's now it's being called a lottery, even though it's a lottery and so, siblings will still have, districts will still have the opportunity to take siblings if they want to. And so there's still some criteria that districts can use. Although,
I'm sorry, so that's the and piece?
that's
is
the
the
and.
siblings?
Yes.
So it's lottery for the first child, and then,
yes.
and then
if
siblings can
districts-
follow?
Yes, yeah.
There's no further and, it's just that.
Districts can develop criteria in order to select students and to say, this is a great fit for the program, or to talk with parents about, this may be not the best fit for students. And so it's kind of moving in a school choice, where parents have options. Parents are being educated prior to coming into being enrolled in the district. METCO headquarters, they're doing a lot of outreach with the Boston community and training and educating and providing workshops for parents about the METCO program, about suburban districts, about what students will face as they're being educated in outside of their community. Also, the expectations of parents. Having a student that's educated outside of their neighborhood or their neighborhood community, and so and so the and is that education piece that before parents and I'm sure you heard the stories that they signed students up when they were babies, when they were infants, newborns, before kindergarten, and so now before parents are doing that, they're getting information and education about the program, which is a great thing.
It's a big change because the way
Yes.
things have been for a long time is literally there'd be stories of people like leaving the hospital with their
Correct.
infant and going down
Yes.
to METCO to sign their
To get on a wait list.
get on a wait list.
to get on a
Yes.
wait list. So there was the sense that you really needed to get on the wait
Yes.
list as soon as possible, and it was a very long wait
Yes.
list. People just sort of never
They
had the
never-
sense that they were
yes,
moving
exactly.
on it. And so the big change that has happened at METCO now
Mm-hmm.
is that it really is a lottery system, and so there's sort of an annual cycle.
Yes,
and a
there is no wait
deadline.
list anymore.
There's no wait list. You submit by a certain time. You go into a pool. There is a lottery, and as a district, then we indicate this is how many seats we have available.
How many
And
seats do we have?
so our program now
We have
is
12 seats. So our program is 54 students. And so depending on the number of seniors that we're graduating, and if any students, leave throughout their 6 through 12 grades here, then we would have a seat open.
What percentage of ballpark people that go in the lottery get us, do you know?
So right now, prior to this new system, this is brand new.
Yeah.
This is the first time we're all using it. So prior to that, they would say that their waiting list had 8,000 applicants on it, and that's at every grade level, kindergarten through 10th grade. And so depending on, district need, it would fluctuate year to year.
Yeah.
And now that the wait list is done away with, that each year, all families in Boston will have the opportunity to apply.
Got it.
yeah.
So, Emily will post the video. I encourage you all to watch it. It is really, really informational. It gives you a good bit of history and historical perspective in a quick, short amount of time. But just to talk about Westwood METCO for a bit, we have a lot of successes. As a METCO district, our students, our current class of students, so we have 8 seniors this year, and already there have been, and that number has changed since last week, we have 17 colleges and universities that students have been accepted to. And so, you know, one of the bragging points is that our Boston students, they are all 100% accepted to 4-year colleges and universities each year. And so that's something that we can really be proud of, that we're, you know, getting students, you know, we're doing our job in terms of that piece. As we talk about, you know, bridging the communities. So this year we did a kind of a revamping of a group, Let's Talk About Race. We added culture and ethnicity to it because as you know, as we move forward in the year 2020, we know that it's not just about race, but culture and ethnicity play a huge part in you know, the conversation right now. And so we have students from Boston, from Westwood, we have students of color, white students, all a part of this group right now. It's a high school group. There are 50 plus students that are identified and wanting to be in this group, and we've met several times this year and talked about several things. One of which is a play that we're able to bring to the district, Mr. Joy. It's through Arts Emerson, so it's a professional production, and we are one of 4 METCO districts that received a grant in order to be able to bring this production to our town. We're actually doing the production in Norwood at the Norwood Theater, which is beautiful. And so again, we're able to bridge, you know, make that bridge between the Norwood community and the Westwood community.
When is that?
It's happening March 16th. Yes. And so we've just started to send out advertisement this week about it. Everything is getting finalized.
But we're sending kids during the day.
Yes,
right?
and so
who's
there's a
sending
field
that?
trip, 9th and 11th graders will go during the day, and then there's an evening performance for the community as well. And our Let's Talk About Race, Culture, and Ethnicity group are student leaders for this production, and so they are currently working with the Arts Emerson, one of their program producers. And she's working with them to tackle and talk about really difficult issues that are raised in the play around race, culture, and ethnicity. And they will have a talk back at the end of the show. And so that will happen not only with the students during the day, but with the community as well. So they're really stepping up and being leaders of the Westwood community. So it's really exciting to watch them grow. In addition, we're doing the Tenacity Challenge, and it's something that the Westwood community has participated in since the beginning of Tenacity. And what Tenacity is a academic challenge quiz bowl for students of color, Black and Latino. It was started by John Sills, the superintendent of Bedford, and it's grown over the 9 years that it's been going. And what's unique about this year is that not only are we sending 2 teams, which we're really excited about, but we also have a mix of Boston resident students as well as Westwood resident students that are on those teams and that will be participating and you know, showing their academic prowess for our town. So that's really, really exciting. And then lastly, because we are a part of the METCO program, the METCO directors, as an association, we do a educators conference every year. And so we give the opportunity for districts to provide teachers, staff members, faculty with professional development around you know, race, how to educate students of color, and so diversity topics that we, you know, often when there's so much, and I'm sure you all know, in terms of district priorities, that it's hard to be able to develop professional development opportunities in every realm. And so because of this opportunity, we're able to know that each year we're sending faculty there. And then this year, what something that was more unique is that typically we've had middle school and high school faculty go and participate in the conference, and this year we had elementary faculty as well that participated, which was really, really exciting. And so the move for next year is to have even more. In addition to that, we are, I'm constantly looking for opportunities to provide professional development for teachers, as well as opportunities for students to participate in conferences. And so our district isn't an IDEAS member, but I have an affiliation with IDEAS, and so we were able to take some students, Westwood resident as well as Boston students, to the IDEAS conference, and the middle school conference is coming up. Mike, I'm sending you an email in the morning to get a list of middle school students to participate in that as well. And so, my core belief is the more we talk and normalize conversations around race, culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, the easier it is for students to talk about it, and then they can start to make impacts. They're the future, and so they are going to be making decisions for all of us soon.
So what's the IDEAS conference?
IDEAS. So it is part of the EDCO collaborative,
Okay.
which is a collaboration with districts all around the Commonwealth, and they come together, and the focus is on topics of diversity, and so they do student conferences as well as adult conferences.
So they
as well.
choose students from each of the districts?
The districts choose their own students.
Okay.
Yes,
And how many do you typically send?
between 6 and 10. Yeah.
And they do professional development, so we've had
Yes.
ideas out to do, last year, I think.
Last
We
year.
had
Last
them
year.
out
Yeah.
doing
Mhm.
a series of workshops with our teachers about culturally proficient teaching.
Are
as
there
well.
any programs like, in other parts of the country where there's a teacher exchange for like a year, where the kids out in the suburbs get to see an inner city teacher come out to talk about some subject, and vice versa, just an exchange for a year? But, I think a lot of the suburban schools would like to have more teachers with inner city experience, and vice versa. And I just didn't know if other states had done that. Has it ever been attempted?
I don't know about
And would it
teacher,
give any value?
exchange. I know that in the charter school world, there's a lot of, peer observations and peer exchanges, but I'm not sure about like a year-long kind of teacher exchange between
never
suburban
really
and urban
discussed the
districts.
pros and
Yeah,
cons.
yeah.
I went to your banquet last year, and quite a few of the students got up and said, the kids come to Westwood in the 6th grade,
Yes.
and there's a difficulty in that they leave behind all their first, second, third friends. So there's an adjustment, to new people.
Yeah.
And are there other towns that they start earlier, and is there a benefit to start earlier? And and we have chosen the 6th. I don't know if there's a reason behind it, but I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
dealing with politically
So-
sensitive issues. But
Yeah. Well,
students
so.
said they love Westwood, they love their friends, but it's a tough transition in the 6th grade versus, I don't know the
Yeah.
pros and cons of earlier.
Middle school's tough regardless. I think I would start by saying that. And yes, to answer your question, there are school districts that start in kindergarten and go through 12th grade. There are school districts that start, Natick, for instance, starts in 5th grade. And so then Natick and Westwood are the middle school, so they have middle school and high school. Lincoln and Sudbury have a K-8 program, and then typically all of the other districts are K-12. I will say, I love history, and so part of my couple months that I've been here has been researching and asking those types of questions and looking through all of Cheryl's files and information that she left behind. And we did have an elementary program many moons ago, and then we've also only had a high school program. And then we went back down to middle school. So it is an ebb and flow, and I would say that's a conversation I would love to be a part of, but
we've
yeah,
had this conversation,
it's
and
not,
It's been
yeah,
about capacity. I mean,
Yes.
we would love to expand the program, but it's always been about the confines of, how many kids we have in the classes, right?
Well, we're in enrollment low, so might be worth thinking
Yeah,
about.
it might be worth thinking about.
Mhm.
In the elementary school, I mean. we're
correct,
low.
yes, correct.
What would you think? Not from the budget, just from a like
Yeah.
value,
Philosophical, yeah.
philosophically.
Standpoint, I think that there's value in both.
Yeah.
So, coming from a district where I did take in kindergartners, kindergarten, first and second grade were the grades where we enrolled students. Those were the only grades we enrolled students. The benefit was that we had the students that was there, when we got them in kindergarten, that was their only, school experience. And there was a value and an ownership of those students by teachers and administrators alike to make sure that we were providing access and opportunities to those students so that we could, just educate them in a whole sense. There was still downfalls and pitfalls in that students were very young. And so there was a culture shock that came with all of a sudden, whether it was being in a daycare setting or being at home, because some students didn't have a preschool experience. And so them coming to school, and the first time they're coming to school, most of their classmates and their teachers didn't look like them. And they were far away from home, and that piece. And so I think that as a district, if we commit to bringing in students at that fragile lower level, that we really have to commit to provide support for students, and support in terms of personnel, in terms of diversity of staff, so that students can we build that connection and we build that capacity and help them as well as their parents, because also when you're getting a kindergarten, that's a parent's first time, especially if it's their first child, that we're getting them acclimated into school culture. And so you really have to have the capacity to have workshops and trainings and events to support families and parents in that transition as well. We take at the middle school, I think that the benefit of that is that students know themselves. They have a sense of who they are. They know, what school is all about, and they value education or they don't. Parents know, what school is about, and they have an understanding of the rigors of their former school versus what we, share with them as the rigors of Westwood. At the middle school level, you can meet with a student and talk to them and to see if they really want to be a part of the METCO program, and, the sacrifice that will entail, and, what they're going to bring to the district. And so, there's a level of discernment there. The cons is that middle school is just tricky for anyone, regardless of, adding them leaving their community and them having to build relationships and, all of that, and really, coming into the school with a true sense of their identity and self. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But what about transportation for kids who are so young?
Yeah.
That must be tricky too.
No,
Is it
I would.
down there?
It's not. It's
No.
not tricky at all. We have a bus monitor on our bus currently.
But they're on the
We
bus
have.
for so long. That's the only.
Yeah, and I have had the luxury of having this wonderful commute, and also the commute to Lincoln. And so if we think about so kids come from all over Boston, and regardless of the district they go to, whether it's Lexington, Lincoln, Sudbury, Concord, Wayland, they're down in the South Shore, they're in, Situate, Cohasset, Hingham. So they're all over, and, the children do it. And, I think it is the supports, the, caring bus monitors that are on the bus, the staff that are greeting them when they come off the bus. A lot of districts will have a breakfast program, or if the district doesn't have a breakfast program, a snack, or something. It's the environment and atmosphere and culture of the district that you create that will support that.
What year did Westwood start METCO program?
1969. Yeah.
There were two moments at the METCO banquet I'd just like to mention.
Yeah.
One was they honored Josepha Jowdy. Josepha, when METCO kids were here late at night for some activity,
Yes.
they slept in Josepha's couches. She welcomed them all in, so they honored her for being a grandmother.
Yes.
Another one was a gentleman got up to give his daughter like a graduation certificate, and he had graduated from Westwood's METCO.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was
It's wonderful. Yes, the generational, programming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you do a lot of great stuff where the kids have, can go to these conferences or participate in these challenges. Do you do anything within the schools to, for the entire school population in terms of exploring conversations about diversity and things like that?
So, in addition, the Let's Talk About Race, Culture, and Ethnicity program is open to all Westwood High School students. In addition to that, the Thursday after February break, we are participating in the African American read-in for Black History Month. And so, again, that's open to all Westwood High School students. It's our school librarian and I are heading that up. And so we have students who are hosting and facilitating. We have classroom teachers, lots of English teachers, who are actually, participating as a class. In that students are, Sean Bevins has opened it up that students can opt in and come on their own. And so we're doing programming in that way. We also recently have been, so after school students in the middle school have the opportunity to stay after school and participate in after school activities. We've had, meetings with students where I've brought high school students down to talk about, issues of race, even the transition as a METCO student between middle school and high school, and to have those conversations. And Tuesday, actually, we had one, and our middle school students talked about wanting to open up the conversation to include, whether it's a grade level or an opt-in or, those types of things. And yes, I'm absolutely, wanting to and willing to plan. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to mention one change that we made when Latifah came on board that I think has been great, is that Latifah is now part of the Administrative Council, which is our pre-K to 12 district leadership team, along with the principals and central office. And so, we think that's really important because this is where we're doing the strategic planning for the district, and it's great to have her be part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Great.
A couple other plugs.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Allison
I'm going to
wants to-
brag a little bit about you since you're sitting here. So, just nice things happening. I mean, I feel like Latifah is partnering with Erin Kuhn to do some professional development in district through a district course that we're offering next year on sort of anti-bias training for teachers. In addition, she, along with Sean Bevan and Sarah Cronin, and I are participating in a Department of Ed diversity network, which looks at strategies for diversifying the workforce. So we're really it's this great kind of helpful program that the department has put together to sort of walk us through kind of some different ways to look at our hiring practices and think about how we can recruit and retain and support more educators of color.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Oh, sorry,
there we go.
There we go.
And so I like to brag about the children, not myself. And so one of the things that we did recently was I took a group of students to Washington, D.C. to participate in the Historically Black Colleges and Universities College Festival. So it was an event that there's over 11,000 students that participate. These are the students that we took, and it was amazing. Students got to interact not only with, there were over 70 HBCUs that were there, but also organizations like the youth chapter of the NAACP, and they actually signed themselves up to volunteer. They're having a youth event this summer, and so they're like, oh, we're going to get, our high school to participate and to be a part of that. And then they went to workshops on, paying for college, writing college essays, and those types of things. And they were amazing. They represented our school very, very well. They asked great questions, and they, took the trip very seriously. And so, I strongly feel that it's about providing access and opportunities for students. And so, the more we can do that, the better off students will be. And so, yeah. And then, how can you help? Advocacy Day. It was called Lobby Day up until a couple years ago. The new CEO for METCO Inc. changed it to Advocacy Day instead of Lobby Day. But it's our push to make sure that we receive state funding each year. We've been on an upward trajectory over the last 4 years. I don't know if you remember, but there was a period of about 10 years where there was a hold in the grant, and it was level funded during that time. And so there have been incremental increases over the last 4 years. And looking at the governor's budget, and also I'm a part, as the METCO Directors Association, I'm a part of the legislative committee, and we met with our METCO champions. It seems like we're going to get about a 6% increase for next school year. And so, the push, is on to make sure that it passes in the both the House and the Senate. And so, for you all, making sure that we're in touch with Mike Rush to let him know that we, are a supporter of this program, and we have to have funding and adequate funding in order to continue to make it work. And you can talk about all the great things that we do currently, and that we want to keep doing as well.
There's an organization in Westwood called Neighbors in Action, and I think they are still active, but they do a lot of lobbying on different causes. So it might make sense to hook them into this, because they have they do a lot. So. And I think they're linked with the inclusionary group in Westwood as well.
Okay.
So
One of the members is on the Welcoming Schools Committee, right?
Mandy came to the.
Oh,
yes.
she came to the
Yeah.
Welcoming
Yeah, so
Schools.
Mandy,
Yes,
I think,
yes,
is in both
yes,
of
I sent her an
those.
email.
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
So
great,
I think
okay.
she's in the Neighbors in Action, but
Okay.
I'll find out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that might be a good source to help with that.
yes. Yeah, any other
Any other
questions?
questions?
Yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Latifah.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You got to watch the video.
Yes.
Yes.
Watch the
I
video.
know.
I'm making a note, post video and watch it.
Great.
Okay.
So next agenda item is a conversation about initial considerations about potential school consolidation. And I think Emily?
Emily's going to start.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Start,
pick up.
yeah,
great.
yeah. So, so we just wanted to have, a very initial conversation about consolidation. And so, really, we're just we're thinking about what would it mean to move from 5 elementary schools to 4 elementary schools. And there are implications that I think are educational, and then things that have to do with our operational budget potentially, and then also some really important things about capital investments. So I put this in your slide, so I think you've all probably seen the answer now, so this isn't fair. But so yeah, I thought, well, the first thing we need to do is really have a sense of just how big or small are our elementary schools in Westwood, because as I'm out at community forums talking to people about that, I think that maybe folks don't have much perspective. I mean, we sort of know what we know, right? But what's happening in other communities? So I took tech districts plus a few others. I threw in Bedford, Concord, Lexington, and Sharon. Also, just to, make it a bigger group. And so this is a scatter plot. Every point here represents an elementary school in these districts, from lowest enrollment to highest enrollment, right? So for those of you playing along, you have to try to think, which 5 points are our elementary schools? Okay, everybody have your guess? Okay. All right, so the diamonds, do you see the 5 diamonds in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are Westwood's schools, right? And I think what becomes clear is our schools are very small. And in fact, if we look at it this way, what I noticed is if you look at all these schools in quartiles, the lowest quartile is comprised of only 3 districts: Westwood, Dedham, and Norwood. So I think it's possible that not only, if we look at our own perspective, it's like Westwood, and if we look to our left and right, we also have these tiny schools. What is actually interesting is Westwood is the only district on this list where all of our schools are in the lowest quartile. So Dedham and Norwood are with us, but they also have some larger schools in their districts as well. So our schools really are pretty
Small and special.
Do you know if there are newer schools that are is it because they put newer schools in and that's how they have, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about Dedham and Norwood.
Well, so that's a very interesting question, and I would love to know sort of the, when each of these points was built. I will say that Dedham's largest school is their newest one, right? Their early childhood center, the Curran Center. So I recognize this is very hard to read, and on this screen, the colors aren't quite as vibrant as on my screen. But I just tried to show you here, who are these other folks, and I know a lot of us went on some tours of schools, so we went to see the Clyde Brown School in Millis. That's this gray dot right here. So if you experienced that school, you have a sense of what it felt like, and you can see where it is. Millis is a relatively small district, so they only have one elementary school. And then we went to see Sunita Williams. So the red dots here are Needham. There are 5 red dots. That's Needham. And the Sunita Williams School is their middle range. It's that one right there, right? So just to provide sort of a frame of reference. And so if we were thinking, the design enrollments that we've been talking about in terms of the building project, both of them would put us here in the third quartile, right?
Well, if it was 660 something, it would actually be.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, that would
Yeah.
get us a little
That'd be
higher.
way
Yep.
up, yeah.
Yep, 685 would be it would be up higher, yeah. Be up higher. Yeah. So, very good point. So, yeah, it's just sort of interesting to think about, what does that mean to think about the size of our schools? So, this is the same data, just shown another way. Here I've sorted the districts by K-5 population, and you can see the number of elementary schools, and it shows you, if you look here at Westwood, Medfield and Bedford, they have just about the same K-5 population that we do, but Medfield has 3 schools and Bedford has 2, right? And if you look at Needham, which also has 5 schools just like us, they have, more than twice as many kids as we do.
Which town had that large school in the last slide? The largest school?
The largest
was
one, that
Needham.
might have been Needham.
Needham.
Yeah,
Yeah,
their
that's what I
largest one.
thought.
Yeah.
That wasn't the new school, right?
No, that wasn't the new one. It's a
The new
different one.
school's about 520.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought. So what
Yeah.
school
I mean, on
was
the
it? Was
last
it the
chart you
middle
just
school?
did,
Mhm.
where you
No, there's no
listed
newer
this one
school.
here,
That's what I mean. Why
is
was
it possible, and my information was 5 years old,
Mhm.
to do this chart over again with each of the schools and when they were built?
Where did you find that information? Because I
Called
looked for it.
people up for the phone.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'd have to make a lot of phone calls.
The problem
The
was it
MSBA
wasn't
site
a
has-
scientific
Does it have
sample.
Go
that?
by town by town.
I tried to find it and I couldn't find
It
it.
should-
So,
it does.
all right, I'll
But
take a look
you call
again.
them up and say, what now? But
Yeah.
it'd be valuable to see where we are with regard to the stock
Yeah.
Yeah.
of, 70-year-old schools, are we
Yeah.
average?
Yeah.
The other thing, it's something, maybe you're getting to it, but what are some of the disadvantages from a teaching perspective
Mhm.
of the smaller schools? I mean, are there any general things that can be said?
Yeah.
That there's a disadvantage
Singleton
The
classes?
Singleton classes.
There are lots of things that, I mean, this is
and I'm not talking about the
important.
public that's gonna ask us, what
Yeah.
are you talking about doing this? I want, like, my neighborhood school.
Yeah, it's an important conversation, and I mean, part of the reason I put this up here and show some of those other communities is that, I have had people say to me on occasion that they think that our success, sort of our academic outcomes, are as a result of having very small schools. And, I mean, that's a theory. I would just say that there are a lot of very high-performing districts that don't have schools the size that we do. There doesn't seem to be data to support that, that hypothesis. So sure, there are pros and cons, and I think, one of the things we talked about with the education plan that's become one of our guiding principles is how, if you have a bigger school, how do you create a small school feel within that so that kids, what we do know clearly from like research literature is that it's important for kids to feel known as individuals, for us to be able to personalize students' education, and so that is clearly a really important thing to think about. So this is just the same data showing it in a different way. So sort of getting to your point, Charlie, I just have this up here as a point of discussion. So, one of the things that we talk a lot about is class size, elementary class size, and the number of students that you have and how many sections you then break it into is something that we're looking at all the time. So what I did was I put up here what we think our enrollment projections are going to be for next year at Deerfield and Hanlon, because this is in fact really what we're doing when we look at these numbers and we think about the budget. So on the left here you can see Deerfield, and so our technical term is like, these are terrible numbers. That's what we say when we look at them, because they're sort of not big enough to split, they're a little too big to be singletons, and so we start trying to figure out what to do. So, we have employed this KK1 model, which I think has been a successful model educationally, so I don't have concerns per se about KK1. The problem is that it works well when the kids are in KN1, but you're just kind of kicking the can down the road, right? So if you look at those kids in grade 3, I think they had a KK1, as I recall. Certainly the 2s did. And at some point you have to collapse them, and we can't do that. We can't really do the multi-age classroom. The multi-age classroom works really well at that developmental moment. It doesn't work as well in like
Right.
grades 3 and 4. So,
And the stars are above our guidelines, correct?
well, what the stars are is, I'm thinking it would be a singleton, but we would need an instructional assistant in there too, potentially. So in option 1, we're saying, we could do KK11. Those kindergarten numbers, by the way, are very much a projection at this point, so I wouldn't want people to think we're making any actual decisions. This is just a hypothetical. And then you could do a singleton 2 and 3 and put IAs in both of them, right? Grade 4, we've got 16 and 17, so those are really pretty small, but they're too big to have together. And then grade 5 is pretty reasonable. So in option 1, you would need 9 teachers plus 2 IAs, right? Then we've got option 2. I was saying, 27. Maybe you could split that if 27 is feeling too big. Truthfully, though, 13 is too small. When we think about the kinds of instructional activities that teachers are doing, where they're differentiating, doing workshop models, and having kids in groups, there's just no way to slice them up with 13. So too small is a real thing. So I'm not sure that would be a good choice either, but you could do that, and then you would need 10 teachers and only 1 instructional assistant, right? So anyway, we're thinking about that. Then you look at Hanlon over here. Hanlon is sort of interesting. I would say the numbers are a little better. Hanlon's a little bit bigger than Deerfield. So option 1, you do 2 sections of everything. But that grade 2 up here, currently there are 3 sections, right? So under option 1, you'd be collapsing them into 23 and 23, was just above the guideline. If we wanted to keep those 3 sections, we actually don't have space at Hanlon. So you could do that if you do a KK11, right? It saves a room. And those numbers right now look pretty reasonable, but we look at that and we would be nervous, like when do you make the decision to go KK11? Because if you have kids move in,
Those K numbers go up.
If those K numbers go up, there's no place for them to go, right? Other than to say, okay, well now we've got to collapse that 3, right? which is why with schools this size, we're frequently in this waiting game, because we're seeing what's going to happen, and we're trying to wait to the last possible moment to make a choice. So we have the best possible information. So this kind of, shows you some of the things that we think about a lot. And so I said, well, let's just pretend that we could put those schools together instantly, right? What would it do? And this is what it would do. And what you can see is it makes beautiful numbers, right? Like this is
That's
what we
the
dream of.
technical term?
That's the technical term, the beautiful numbers. I mean, those are really wonderful class sizes. They're all well within guideline. Some are a little bit under. And remember, we said before on the previous slide, you either need 21 teachers and 2 IAs or 22 teachers and 1 IA. So it's actually less expensive, right? It would, depending on how you chose to go, you would save between $55,000 and $110,000, which is nice. And it would be educationally better. I mean, more to the point, right? It just, I think, would be better. So that's one example. And then I thought, let's play the game for Shane and Hanlon too. And I caution that I'm not suggesting that in this example we're comparing which consolidation is better, because these are just the numbers that they happen to be for next year. So I don't think we can draw much conclusion from this. But, Sheehan's quite a bit bigger, and so they tend to have 3 sections per grade, not always. And so I said, well, let's take what we actually have as sort of the current staffing level and assume that we're going to use all of those teachers. But I think what you can see here is that you could collapse some of those sections too. I mean, kindergarten is tight, but certainly grade 4, you could collapse that into 2 sections and be within guideline. But let's just say we stay with 16 here for a second. And then we've got the same array of options for Hanlon. If we put those together, I said, well, let's, in option 1, I said, I'm going to assume the same level of staffing. Let's just say I take all the staff we have allocated for those 2 buildings and use them. That's what your class sizes would be. But certainly you could collapse some of those numbers and still have very nice class sizes. So just sort of the more kids you have at a grade level, the more options and more flexibility you have.
3
in terms
teachers,
of
that's 200,000.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's what it is. That's like $200 and some thousand dollars right there. So that's significant. And interestingly, this example here, you can see it would be 507. So the design enrollment that we're talking about for Deerfield and Hanlon is 560, right? So this actually probably is a fairly good representation of what that size would do in terms of, we've been talking about is that, potentially 5 sections per grade, right? And here we could do 5 or 4 even, right? So I just put it up as an illustration to say that these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about, that something about this very small schools is difficult educationally, and it's also not necessarily efficient in terms of thinking about how to use resources. So that's kind of what's on our mind
Great.
right now. And then Lemma thinks about a whole different set of things, right?
Yes. So what you'll see on the slide is that I've been thinking about the impacts of consolidation on the annual capital budget. And here, consolidation of 2 schools, very importantly, would lead to significant and immediate cost avoidance, because the maintenance on our oldest buildings is expected to be expensive in the next coming years. And so what I'm thinking about is that the alternative of having those 3 elementary schools remain as they are, and the longer process to renovate or replace them as 3 independent and renovated or reconstructed buildings, that will take a long period. And in that interim, we'll need to maintain the buildings in a good condition so that the students are safe and they're comfortable. And that's the concern here. So I made a list of projects. for next year that we know we're anticipating at Deerfield and Sheehan. This is just an example, so not even a complete list. But we know we have boiler replacements, we have door repairs, that's just this summer. There's more that has recently come to my attention that we're going to be doing at the Deerfield. And then there are examples of projects within the next 5 to 7 years, and those are very significant. So we have HVAC replacements or repairs, potentially exceeding 400,000. An electrical panel that will cost 100,000, cafeteria floor replacement at 30,000, roof work in stages, which is quite significant and could be up to 700 or more thousand, and all of this would hit in the next 5 to 7 years. So in these buildings alone, I'm looking at least $1 million, up to $2 million in annual capital expenditures to keep them operating in a way that's safe and comfortable for our students. And you're well aware that our annual capital budget is about $1 million. We've been lucky that we had that last year, for example. But that covers technology, that also covers our copiers, and that is the budget that we apply to maintain and make improvements across all of our buildings. So if we decide as a town that we'd like to maintain 5 elementary schools, I think that capital budget will be stretched thinner. So what it might mean is that there could be deferred projects at the other buildings because we might just have necessary repairs at either the Deerfield or the Sheehan. So that's the real scenario. The Martha Jones has a roof repair that we're estimating would cost $260,000. So that's an example of something that we would like to do, but we have to take the most urgent need first. So we'd be making difficult decisions. And in the worst case scenario, we might need additional capital from the town to maintain these buildings. I think what is risky is a situation which you have a repair that triggers getting a building up to code. And what triggers that is if you are affecting at least 33% of the square footage or 33% of the value. And so we could approach that with some of the work that we have to do in these buildings. And once we are there, bringing a building up to code is in the millions, and that's a whole different category of expense. So that's the reality for the annual capital budget. The operating budget is also important, so that's the next slide. And so here, I think what's important is that the consolidation does have some long-term impacts for us. In the first piece, we'll get more for our utility dollars. Especially if we consolidate, we'll have our oldest buildings that are inefficient from a water and energy standpoint, so they will be coming offline. They'll be coming offline faster, so that will reduce waste and also make the buildings substantially more comfortable. And then on the other side, I know Ken, as our Director of Operations, will be very grateful if he has fewer HVAC systems to maintain, just because each system has its own quirks. And so 5 buildings, if we choose to have 5 elementary buildings, is 5 HVAC systems. 4 is 4 systems. So there's a certain long-term savings that we have in the simplicity that we gain, that we achieve if we have fewer buildings. So those are my anticipated impacts long-term.
Lim and I have really been talking about that timing issue a lot, right? Because we're thinking, well, I mean, what we're doing right now is kind of like keeping the buildings on life support, right? And so there is something that's very attractive about saying, let's solve 2 problems immediately, right? I mean, just the cost avoidance scenario, and to sort of immediately be able to like take care of that risk proposition, I think is something we really need to consider.
Any questions on this one?
Well, I think a couple other comments about consolidation as a whole. So a third sort of bucket of information, you know, there's the educational piece, there's the operational piece, there's also a redistricting piece. We don't have the redistricting report in final form yet. And the consultant that we've hired is actually going to present to the school committee in April. So we will have that presentation on redistricting. But I think what's clear is just, I mean, you could even do this if you just look at the map. And, you know, you erase the line between Hanlon and Deerfield, and you see one thing, you erase the line between Sheehan and, you know, so you can kind of see it yourself. but it's, what's clear is that, you know, the district areas for 5 schools are small. You know, it's sort of more chopped up than it would be. And I also want to point out there's precedent for 4 schools. You know, I grew up in Westwood with 4, as of 2nd grade, with 4 elementary schools. And so, and I got a pretty good education. So I just think that this is something we really should, as a school committee, should consider. I think the biggest problem I see is the educational piece. You know, the fact that every single year we run into these scenarios where we're juggling numbers, and some school, you know, some classrooms are too big and some are too small, and I just think that it's sort of an unwieldy model. And it's, you know, I don't know, that's what I think. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think it's educationally and fiscally responsible to consolidate. It's interesting because we are a small town, 14,000. I grew up in a town of 36,000 that was on that chart, and they have fewer elementary schools.
Right.
So I think I did okay too, but I don't know. The jury's still out.
I know, right?
But I think that, yeah, I don't know if we want to. I think people should understand too, you know, that we're following, I know you've said it over and over, and we all know this, but we're following a very, very specific process. And I know we came up with, you know, we whittled down to a certain number of options. And some of the options are in there because by process we have to consider those. But
Yeah, I mean, we are looking at a Hanlon-only project.
Right.
Where we do not consolidate.
and we're doing that because the process requires us to do
Right.
that.
Right, because we want to understand what that looks like. You know, we want to make sure that we're vetting every single
Right.
option.
But when you fix the Hamlet, if you only fix the Hamlet, what do you end up with?
Right.
Right.
You end up with
a-
2
a
other
school-
schools.
Well, not only that, you end up with a school that's 50 years old still.
With a Band-Aid
right?
on it.
With a
Oh,
Band-Aid.
fixing the Hamlin.
Yeah,
But even
yeah.
if we built a new Hamlin,
Even
right?
if you,
If we
built-
could
oh,
also build a
just
brand-new Hamlin.
Just a plain Hamlet.
Right,
Right.
Which
right.
would be,
Which
But-
you could do.
Yeah.
But you're then have the same problems with Sheehan and Deerfield that you have now.
and you
Right.
also have a problem with Hamlin because it's too small. You still have
Yes.
singleton classes
Yes.
and the issues that we have with too small schools.
You haven't addressed, right.
and the fiscal responsibility and the fact that we would get more bang for our buck from the MSBA if we are
Absolutely.
consolidating.
That's right.
We would be, and I know we're not making a decision today.
Right.
Obviously, my thoughts are coming through loud and clear, but I think we would be remiss in our obligation to the town if, we really didn't very seriously consider this consolidation option.
I agree.
The thing that's impressed me in this process is that education has drastically changed from the way these buildings were built. You know, they're all square rooms. And now we've got smart enough to realize that some kids need to be taken out to get math or English. And so it isn't the square room anymore. You need to have spaces where all this goes on. And these buildings, through miracles that the teachers, they're doing the teaching in closets, in hallways, you know. But they're making it work, but it's not the ideal way education is needed today. And it's, that struck me right away when they started to point that out, that we're talking about just modernizing the way education should be, and our teachers get air conditioning by opening windows. You know, they've been keeping it going, but we really need to, update the ability to provide quality education in a different type of building that doesn't exist right now.
Right.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add, I'm guessing, there's other probably operating, but it's hard to say now, but if you had a one sports section school, for example, do you really need 2 nurses, or could you just have one? And there's other,
Right. Yeah.
there's
No,
all sorts of
exactly.
I want to say almost more on the
Well,
administrative side.
special
Yeah.
education
Special ed,
related
yeah.
services, right, where
Yeah.
we
Would be
more
have,
efficient.
Yeah.
we have people who are
Or
traveling
travel.
from building to
Right.
building.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's
Right.
also, the point that you brought up about, and we've had a little bit of discussion, some of us about this, but, parents are concerned, when they talk about the neighborhood schools, I don't know if some are talking about a school close by. We do live in a small town, so compared to other towns, I think we all live in neighborhoods where there may be more than one school close by. Not everywhere, but when we talk about consolidating a school, there is some concern with parents thinking that, oh, the principal's not going to know all the kids because it's a bigger school. But there are so many ways, right, that you can address that. I mean, we address that in the middle school and in the high school, right? In the middle school, we have teams. In the high school, right, we hired we have the
Dean of Students.
Thank you. The Dean of Students and the Assistant Principal. So there are so many ways, easy ways to address that. So I think we can easily allay parents' concerns that, okay, well, the building might be bigger, but you can still have your cohorts.
Right.
And so
Right.
even I've had conversation with people who've worked in other districts where, not that we necessarily will do this, but 2 schools are within one building.
Well,
So,
that's what
right?
some of the options that we've looked at, separate them
Right,
into 2.
K to
almost-
3,
yeah.
and so it's,
Yeah.
so there are a lot of options. So I think we can certainly allay, again, I go back to what parents are thinking about in terms of neighborhood schools. Not always the same, it's not always the same definition when you talk to different people. But if it's about having a school that feels small and where your teachers and your administrators are going to know the kids, it seems like that would be an easy
Yeah.
fix.
I mean, there's no doubt that that a consolidated school, whether it's 560 or particularly at 685, will be bigger than any other school we have, right? We can't get away from that. But as you said, there are ways to make it feel just like a small school. And I think that's an important point to make. And
And
yeah.
if you look at some of the
I lost my
larger
other point.
schools that we
that's where I was
visited-
going with this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I had
You
a
go.
follow-up point. No, but if you look at the schools, the 560 number is very much in line with most of schools, right? It's not a big, crazy
Well, we saw
number
it on the
for a
chart,
school.
too.
Right, exactly. And actually, if you look at those numbers and you did a student per, basically students per school number,
Right.
and average that out, not, but you didn't break it down into the different school populations, you just took the total population and divided by 5?
Yep, I did that, so that's.
Oh, you did?
Next to the number of elements, students per school average, is that what you mean?
Where's
We
that?
ranked number 1.
We're, yeah, well.
We are, oh yeah,
yes.
there we are,
We're
yeah,
the
we're,
lowest.
Yeah,
wait, where is it?
The first column.
it's, sorry, it's this column right here.
Yeah,
Right?
okay,
Is that
so
what you
we
mean?
are the smallest school,
Yeah.
literally, we're the number 1 in that category. And that to me is not a good thing. I mean, I think Deerfield and Hamlin are too small. I just do. And I
The
don't
thing
know.
that we didn't talk about too that I worry about, like, I mean, I think about the Deerfield situation where we're getting like a number of singleton classes, is that, forget the number, just to be with the same group
Right.
of kids for 6 years, I think it's really hard.
It's tough if you have personality.
Well, it's hard for the
personality,
students
yeah.
and it's hard for the teachers.
Yeah.
And the parents,
Yeah.
right? Because you have one conflict in that class.
And that's it, yeah.
And
The
that's
other thing
it.
is, we're not gonna open these schools at those numbers. They're gonna be a lot.
No, yeah.
You
well,
mean at the
that's-
560,
at the
right, it's not gonna
560.
open at
No.
560.
No, the
That's the
560
peak.
would be
Yeah.
the peak. Yeah. Well, so we can do the math, right? If we were to, if we were to combine Hanlon and Deerfield, it would be a little over 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we know Richard.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And how big is Shan now?
Sheen is 308. I was
Yeah.
gonna say I was right there. Oh, right there. There you go. 308. Right on the screen. Yeah, there they are. 194, 207, 2682.
It's funny, the
Yeah.
issue of the singleton classrooms, because, right, years ago, remember, there was one singleton classroom at the Hanlon School.
I remember that.
And the parents came in every school committee meeting. What are you gonna do about the singleton?
26. I remember it.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
It was an issue, and now here we are with many.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Can I say one?
Yeah.
I mean, one other thing that strikes me about this data is that there's literally no correlation between academic kind of outcomes. If you look at some of the very, very top performing school systems in the
Right.
state, Lexington, Dover, Wayland, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with that
Right.
really. So there's something else going on
Well, the
there. So if
largest-
there's a fear about that, I feel like there are
The
definitely.
largest school on that graph is in Needham.
Yeah.
Right? The largest school. And I mean, Needham has pretty good schools.
They do.
We're better.
This is not.
We're being recorded.
All right, great. So,
Yeah.
that was a good conversation.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I just thought it would be important for you all to talk and
Good data,
for you
yeah.
to see what we're
Right.
thinking about
Right.
right now, so.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Good. So, all right, the third time we're going to offer public participation for anything else besides the topics we talked about. Does anyone want to participate this time? Okay, great. So before the action items, I don't know, Giuseppe, you wanted to make a
Okay.
comment on something?
I'd like to mention about it. I'd like to say that I've been on the school committee for 27 years, and I have enjoyed every moment, mostly. I've made wonderful friends. I've worked with fantastic people. I've learned a lot. But I've decided that this year I'm not going to stand for re-election. So I will be around. I'll help in any way I can, but I think it's time for new blood. And I thank you all for all your support all these years.
Well, thanks for all your hard work.
Yeah.
Well, there will be time for tributes and time for
I would
roasts.
say,
and
I
roasting.
assume we'll be speechifying later.
That will be coming soon, but thank you, Giuseppe. There'll be more time for us all. Thank you for an
Yes.
amazing contribution. Thank you. Good. So let's move on to action items. The first action items are the approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget. And I think we're all good. You're pulling up the actual numbers. I think we
Yes.
need those for
So it
the
is.
motions.
This number.
So the first one would be on the operating budget, operating budget of $48,187,500. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I will move to approve that. Do I have to say the number? I'll move to approve the operating budget of $48,187,500.
Do
I'll
I-
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye, unanimous, great, thank you. The next one will be approval of the capital
Oh, I'm
budget.
going to get that number for us too. Oh, this is not an efficient way to go about it, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't have all my
Good review
animations
of
in
the
suddenly.
slides.
That's a quick review. Oh, okay,
There
there
you
we
go.
go. All right, so it's the
Bottom
bottom right.
right.
All right, Matt, you want to do this one?
I will make a motion to approve the fiscal year 21 capital budget for $1,017,000.
Yeah,
Second.
All right, any discussion on the capital? All those in favor? Aye, unanimous. Finally, the approval of the Chapter 70 education, Chapter 70 education state aid increase.
Yes, it's the FY20 chapter 70.
FY20.
So to incorporate it, and it's this amount, 160, 182.
I'll make a motion to approve the FY20 Chapter 70 education state aid allocation of $160,182.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Let's move on to the minutes. The next one is approval of the minutes from January 23rd, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make
Go ahead.
the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Next, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 30th, 2020?
I'll motion.
Wasn't that just yesterday?
Yes.
Yes.
Seems like yesterday.
It was. I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye, unanimous. All right, finally, two gifts. The first one, $502.50.
Yes, just trying
You
to.
can round it. Yeah, from the Boosters Club, Westwood Boosters Club.
Yes, so a generous gift from the Westwood Boosters Club used to purchase different celebratory gifts, I think for teams. And that's in the amount of $502.50.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Finally, the PTO, $800 from Family School.
Yes, and I can't find.
What a
Oh, here it
nice
is. Yes.
generous gift.
So this is again the fabled virtual sandbox that we keep
sandbox.
talking about. Yes, you really have to get this here.
Truly
'cause
virtual.
You voted on it several times now. So this is to get one for Hamlin for $800, and we're very appreciative of that donation.
All right, I have a motion to accept the $800 from Family PTO.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Finally, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
Oh, yeah, you do. This is not your, let's make it
not
clear,
the
this is
last
not your
meeting.
last meeting, right?
Is there a second?
Jeez.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.